Before we begin, consider subscribing to The Forgotten Soldier. It helps keep these stories alive. And if you feel like it, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. My name is Thomas Mercer, and for 40 years, I've kept a secret that 3 governments would kill to protect. In 1983, I was a 22-year-old Army Ranger selected for a program that didn't exist. A program designed to answer one question: what happens to human consciousness when you remove it from the human body? They told us we were testing experimental combat enhancement technology. They told us the mortality rate was acceptable. They told us we'd be heroes. What they didn't tell us was that we weren't the first group. We were the 5th, and the previous 4 groups had a 100% casualty rate. I'm the only survivor of Unit 77. Everyone else is dead, insane, or worse. And I'm only alive because I discovered something they never intended us to find. Proof that human consciousness doesn't need a body to survive, it just needs a host. And I've been sharing my body with something else for 40 years. It started in February 1983 at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. I was in my barracks when a civilian in an expensive suit appeared with orders transferring me to a program I'd never heard of. "Ranger Mercer," he said, not asking, just confirming. "You scored in the 98th percentile on psychological resilience testing. You have no living family, no significant romantic attachments, no religious affiliations that would complicate your participation." I was being selected because I was expendable. "Participation in what, sir?" He handed me a folder marked "Eyes Only, Clearance Level Cosmic." Inside was a single page with 2 options: accept transfer with immediate effect, or decline and face reassignment to classified duties in Central America, where life expectancy was measured in weeks. Not really a choice. The facility was in Nevada. Not Area 51, though we weren't far from it. This place didn't appear on any map. We flew in on an unmarked C-130 that landed on a runway surrounded by nothing but desert and mountains. There were 12 of us initially, all Rangers or Special Forces, all young, fit, psychologically screened, all without families or connections that would ask too many questions if we disappeared. The commanding officer was Colonel Henshaw, a man with dead eyes who'd clearly seen things that had hollowed him out from the inside. His second was Dr. Kira Volkov, a Soviet defector with a thick accent and the kind of scientific brilliance that made her terrifying. "Gentlemen," Henshaw began our first briefing, "you've been selected for Project Chrysalis. What I'm about to tell you is classified beyond top secret. The Soviet Union has developed technology that allows consciousness transfer between human subjects. They call it the Matryoshka Protocol." He clicked a remote. Grainy footage showed Soviet soldiers in a laboratory. One soldier lay on a table, electrodes attached to his skull. Another soldier across the room, similarly wired. When they threw the switch, the soldier on the table convulsed violently. When he stopped seizing, he spoke perfect Russian, but with the other soldiers' memories, mannerisms, voice patterns. They'd swapped consciousness between bodies. "The implications are obvious," Henshaw continued. "Perfect infiltration. A Soviet spy could transfer into an American general's body. An assassin could inhabit a senator. The technology is already operational." Dr. Volkov stepped forward. "Your mission is to master this technology before Soviets perfect it. I defected with partial specifications. We have built prototype. You will be test subjects." That should have been the moment I walked out. But I was 22, trained to follow orders, and stupid enough to believe I was invincible. The first 2 weeks were standard military training, physical conditioning, psychological evaluation, endless medical tests. They drew so much blood I started joking they were vampires. But the testing got stranger. They'd show us images and measure our brain activity, put us in sensory deprivation tanks for hours, give us drugs that made reality feel negotiable. The other guys started calling it ghost training, preparing us to exist without bodies. The actual transfer chamber was in sub-level 3, deep underground, where the temperature stayed constant at 55 degrees. The room was circular, maybe 40 feet across, with 2 modified dental chairs in the center surrounded by equipment that looked more like medieval torture devices than medical technology. Dr. Volkov explained the process with clinical detachment. Consciousness is electromagnetic pattern. Brain is antenna receiving signal. We interrupt signal, redirect to new antenna, like changing radio station. What happens to the original consciousness? Asked Rodriguez, a Green Beret from Texas. Volkov's expression didn't change. In successful transfer, original consciousness moves to new body. In unsuccessful transfer, she shrugged. Consciousness dissipates, permanent death of identity. And the failure rate? Long pause. Improving. That's when I should have run. The first transfer attempt was with Jenkins and Martinez, 2 volunteers who'd been friends since basic training. The theory was that emotional connection might stabilize the process. They strapped them into the chairs, attached dozens of electrodes to their skulls, inserted IVs with drugs that would keep their bodies alive during the transfer. The machinery hummed to life with a sound like 1,000 wasps. Dr. Volkov monitored readouts. Beginning consciousness displacement in 3, 2, 1. The sound changed, became higher, more intense. Jenkins and Martinez both went rigid, every muscle locked. Then Jenkins started screaming, not pain, but terror. Raw existential horror of having your sense of self ripped from its moorings. Martinez's body was seizing. Alarms blared. Medical team rushed in. Volkov shouted orders in Russian and English simultaneously. When it was over, Jenkins was dead. Cardiac arrest during the process. Martinez survived physically but never spoke again. Just sat in his cell staring at nothing, occasionally whispering numbers in a language no one recognized. They took him away 3 days later. We never saw him again. Unfortunate, Henshaw said during debriefing. But we're gathering valuable data. The next attempt will incorporate these learnings. The next attempt killed both subjects. The third attempt resulted in one subject swapping successfully, but when he returned to his original body, he came back different. Started claiming there were others in his head, voices that weren't his. He slit his wrists a week later, using a pen he'd sharpened on his cell floor. By the end of month 1, we'd lost 6 men. They came for me on a Tuesday, March 15th, 1983. The date is burned into my memory because it was the day I died, the first time. My partner was supposed to be a guy named Chen, a ranger with a photographic memory. But Chen had hanged himself the night before using his bedsheets. Instead, they brought in someone I'd never seen. Prisoner number 7743. No name, no rank, no background. Just a man, maybe 50 years old, with scars, suggesting a very hard life and eyes that had seen things that broke stronger men. Who is he, I asked. Volunteer from federal prison system, Henshaw said. Life sentence, agreed to participate in exchange for clemency. Volunteer, right? The prisoner didn't speak as they strapped him in, didn't resist. Just watched me with those knowing eyes like he'd already seen how this would end. Dr. Volkov prepped the equipment. Mr. Mercer, you understand the risks. If transfer is successful, you will experience approximately 30 seconds in subject's body before automatic return to your own. If unsuccessful, you die. Do you consent? I'd been conditioned to say yes. I consent, The drugs hit my bloodstream, warm, heavy, pulling me down into chemical darkness. The last thing I heard was Volkov counting down. 3, 2, 1, initiating transfer. What happened next isn't something language was designed to describe. Imagine every atom of your being simultaneously exploding outward and collapsing inward. Your sense of self, everything you think of as you, being compressed into a single point of awareness and then fired like a bullet through a tunnel that doesn't exist in physical space. I was nowhere. I was everywhere. I was screaming but had no mouth. I was dying but couldn't stop existing. And then, snap. I was in the prisoner's body. The transition was so violent I threw up immediately, except it wasn't my stomach, wasn't my throat, wasn't my vomit. I was wearing someone else's flesh like an ill-fitting suit. Every sensation was wrong. This body was older, damaged, full of old injuries and chemical dependencies my consciousness didn't understand. But worse than the physical wrongness was the mental contamination. I could feel him, the prisoner, still there. Not gone, not transferred. His memories, his personality, his consciousness was still present, crushed into a corner of his own mind, and he was screaming. Not with sound, with pure telepathic horror. Get out, get out, get out, get out. I tried to speak, to tell Volkov something was wrong, but the prisoner's vocal cords wouldn't obey. I was a passenger struggling for control while the rightful owner fought to expel the invader. Then I felt others. Consciousness fragments that weren't me or the prisoner, dozens of them, maybe hundreds, trapped in this body's neural architecture like ghosts in a haunted house. Every previous subject who'd been transferred into this body, they were all still there, screaming, fragmenting, dissolving into madness. This wasn't the prisoner's first time as a test subject. He was a receptacle. They'd been using him over and over, and every consciousness transferred into him got trapped, unable to return. I tried to scream a warning, but my time was up. The return transfer hit like a freight train. I snapped back into my own body, except I didn't come back alone. I woke up in medical, vitals stable, transfer logged as successful. First subject to complete a round trip without dying or going catatonic. But I could feel them. Fragments of the prisoner's consciousness had hitched a ride back, and fragments of all the others trapped inside him. Dozens of partial personalities now living in my head like squatters. At first it was subtle. Memories that weren't mine. Sudden cravings for cigarettes, even though I'd never smoked. Phantom pains in body parts I'd never injured, random words in languages I'd never learned, bubbling up in my thoughts. Then the voices started. Not auditory hallucinations, actual voices. Fragments of people who died in the transfer experiments, now permanently encoded in my neural architecture. You can't tell them, a voice whispered in Spanish. They'll kill you if they know. We're all still here, said another in Russian, trapped forever. Make it stop. Make it stop. Make it stop. Sobbed a third, younger, terrified. I tried to function normally during debriefing, told them the transfer was disorienting but successful, described the 30 seconds in the prisoner's body exactly as they wanted to hear it. But Dr. Volkov watched me too carefully. You are experiencing residual effects. Just some disorientation, should pass. Her eyes narrowed. No unusual thoughts? Memory fragments that do not belong to you. No, ma'am. She didn't believe me. She didn't. That night in my cell, I discovered something worse. The fragments weren't just voices. They had knowledge, technical information about the transfer process, security protocols, things I'd never been briefed on. One fragment, Russian, spoke with Volkov's accent, knew the truth about Project Chrysalis. The consciousness doesn't transfer cleanly, the voice explained. It copies. Original stays in original body. Copy moves to new body. But copies are unstable. They fragment, corrupt, merge with other fragments. Every transfer creates ghosts, meaning the prisoner was still fully conscious in his own body. And a copy of my consciousness was still trapped in there with all the others. A version of me was being tortured right now in someone else's neural prison. And there's more, another voice added. The technology isn't American reverse engineering Soviet research. It's older, much older. Both sides found it. Over the next week, through fragments of memory that didn't belong to me, I pieced together the real story. In 1947, something crashed in Roswell. Not a weather balloon, not a Soviet spy device, something else. Among the wreckage, they found technology that could record and transfer consciousness. The aliens, if that's what they were, had mastered it. They could copy themselves endlessly, inhabit multiple bodies simultaneously, achieve a form of distributed immortality. The US and USSR both recovered pieces of the technology. Both spent decades trying to understand it. The Cold War race wasn't just about nuclear weapons. It was about whoever mastered consciousness transfer first would achieve military supremacy. Perfect spies, perfect assassins, soldiers who couldn't truly die because their consciousness could hop to new bodies. The ultimate strategic advantage. But both sides discovered the same problem. Human consciousness wasn't designed for transfer. It fragmented, corrupted, merged with other consciousness in ways that drove subjects insane. The alien technology worked for aliens. Humans weren't compatible, but that didn't stop them from trying. By week 3, I'd counted 17 distinct voices in my head. Some helpful, providing information, others hostile, trying to take control. The worst was someone who called himself Designate 7, a test subject from 1967 who'd been copied so many times his original identity had shattered into thousands of fragments scattered across dozens of bodies. "You're going to fragment too," 7 warned. "The more transfers you do, the more you'll split. Eventually, there won't be a you anymore. Just fragments pretending to be whole." I couldn't let them know I was contaminated. Contaminated subjects were terminated. I'd seen it happen. But Dr. Volkov was suspicious. She ran extra psychological evaluations, more brain scans. I could feel her closing in. Then Rodriguez, the Green Beret who'd asked about failure rates, snapped during a transfer attempt. Started screaming about the voices, about the others trapped in his head. They sedated him, dragged him to sublevel 4, where we never saw subjects go. I heard the gunshot 3 hours later. That's when I knew I had to run. The fragments helped. Security protocols, guard rotations, blind spots and camera coverage, information from a dozen different sources cobbled together into an escape plan. I made my move during a scheduled medical evaluation. Overpowered the guard, took his weapon and key card, fought my way to the surface. The fragments guided me through corridors I'd never seen, past security I didn't know existed. Alarms blared, lockdown initiated, but I had knowledge from at least 3 former security personnel fragmenting in my head. They knew the system, knew the override codes. I made it to the motor pool, stole a Jeep, crashed through the gate doing 60 miles per hour. Bullets shattered the rear window. I kept driving into the Nevada desert as the facility disappeared behind me. They didn't pursue far. Couldn't risk civilian witnesses seeing a military operation in an area that officially didn't exist. I drove for 3 days, using cash stolen from the guard. Eventually ditched the Jeep in Arizona, hopped freight trains, became one more homeless veteran that nobody looked at twice. That was 40 years ago. For 4 decades, I've been running, living off the grid, changing names, never staying anywhere long enough to be found. The fragments are still with me, 17 distinct personalities sharing my headspace. Most have faded, become background noise, but a few remain vivid. Designate 7 is still here, still warning me, still fragmenting further with each passing year. Dr. Volkov's voice, or a fragment that knew her secrets, told me the program didn't end. It expanded, went deeper black, spread to other facilities, and I've seen evidence. In 1995, I was in Seattle when I saw Colonel Henshaw on TV, except he'd supposedly died in a car accident in 1984. But there he was, same face, same voice, testifying before Congress about military readiness. Either they faked his death, or they'd successfully transferred his consciousness into a younger body. In 2003, a fragment started screaming about 9/11 weeks before it happened. Not precognition, memory from someone who'd been briefed on black operations involving consciousness transfer and terrorism. The technology had been weaponized. I started noticing patterns. Politicians who seemed to change personality overnight. CEOs who survived fatal accidents but came back different. Military leaders who should have aged but looked 30 years younger. How many people in power are originals? How many are copies? How many are fragments pretending to be whole? The fragments argue about it constantly. 7 thinks the entire government is run by transferred consciousness. Others think I'm paranoid, but we all agree on one thing. The technology is operational, and it's being used. 3 months ago, I made a mistake. Got comfortable in a small town in Montana, stayed too long, made friends, started feeling almost human again. Then I saw her, Dr. Kira Volkov, at a coffee shop in town. She'd aged, she'd be in her 80s now, but it was definitely her. Our eyes met. Recognition flashed across her face. I ran. That's when I knew I had to tell someone, had to warn people before it's too late. Because if Volkov found me after 40 years, others will too. And when they come, they won't want to recapture me. They'll want to know how I survived with fragments intact. They'll want to study how my consciousness has remained cohesive despite contamination. They'll want to use me to perfect the technology. So I'm recording this now, uploading it through encrypted channels, hoping it reaches people before they find me. If you're watching this, understand, the Cold War never ended. It just went underground, into our heads. The technology to transfer consciousness exists. It's imperfect, fragmenting, drives subjects insane. But they're getting better at it. How many people do you know who've changed? Who came back from surgery different? Who survived accidents that should have killed them, but now seem like strangers, wearing familiar faces? The fragments in my head, 17 voices from 17 different people, they all agree. This is just the beginning. Once they perfect the technology, death becomes obsolete. The wealthy, the powerful, the connected, they'll hop from body to body forever. Everyone else becomes inventory. Fresh bodies for transfer, consciousness farms. I'm probably dead by the time you see this. Either they found me, or 7's prediction came true, and I finally fragmented completely. But I'm leaving this warning. Question everything. Question everyone. Question your own memories, because contamination spreads through contact. Every transfer creates fragments, and fragments can infect others. The person you think you are might just be a copy, a fragment of someone who died decades ago in a facility that doesn't exist. I live with 17 voices. You might already have more than that and not even know it yet. Stay alert. Trust no one who changes too suddenly. And if you start hearing voices that aren't yours, run. because that means you've been contaminated, and contamination is permanent. My name is Thomas Mercer, Unit 77, Project Chrysalis, and I'm the only survivor because I learned to live with my ghosts. Can you say the same about yours?